Hey everyone, in this lecture, we're going to be introducing scatter plots. Now, scatter plots are great visual representations of the coordination between two numerical variables. Now, let's suppose I have two numerical variables, to give an example. One is going to be the number of hours of sleep, and the other numerical variable that we're going to be measuring is your GPA. Now, these two numerical variables can be measured simultaneously with any, for example, any person. I can go up to a person and measure both the number of hours that they sleep and their current GPA. And so, for example, for one person, I get that they sleep for 8 hours and they have a GPA of 4. I might get that this other person sleeps for 4 hours and they have a 2. 6, maybe we get a 3. 4, we get 2 again, and then 4, we get 3. So if we notice, it looks like that the higher the number of hours that you sleep, the higher your GPA, relatively speaking. But that's not always perfectly correct, because if we notice that these two examples right here, you have two people who sleep the exact same number of hours, but they have different GPAs. Now, these two variables are coordinated with each other. We're measuring them both simultaneously. And whenever you are measuring two numerical variables simultaneously, you can represent the relationship between the two using a graph. And so I'm going to scrap these values and come up with new ones and represent these two values at a time simultaneously with what are called points. So here I'm going to have the number of hours slept, and then the y variable is going to represent your GPA. And once again, we're going to go all the way up to 8. And that'll be 4, 2, and 6. And then the highest GPA you can get is a 4. Oops. And then 2, 3, and 1, and technically 0 and 0. Now, whenever we measure a subject, we're going to be measuring two variables simultaneously. So for example, one guy we measured with a number of hours of sleep was 4. So I'm going to represent that vector right here. Vector meaning distance. This guy sleeps for 4 hours, but also has a GPA of, let's say, 3. So we have two values measured simultaneously. And sometimes people look at this as we have 3 as their GPA, and we have 4 hours of sleep. But we can actually represent these two quantities, these two values, simultaneously with one single point. And that is the intersection of the horizontal and vertical lines from these points, which is right here. And let me use a different color. I'll use purple. So this point right here represents two quantities simultaneously. Really important to know that. Simultaneously. I think that's spelled right. So this point represents both 4 hours and 3 as your GPA. And we can do this for every single subject. For example, we have someone else who also slept 4 hours, but got a GPA of 2.0. We had someone else who slept maybe 2 hours and got a 1.0. Maybe someone who slept 6 hours and got a 4.0. Someone who slept 8 hours and got a 4.0. Someone who slept 6 hours and got a 2.0. And let's say this is our sample. And so in total, we measured 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 subjects. And each subject, we measured two quantities simultaneously. And each of these points represents those two quantities at the same time. For example, this point right here represents a GPA of, a number of hours of sleep of 8 and a GPA of 4. So we could represent this point with 8, 4, meaning we go over 8 and then up 4. And we could represent that vector over here if we wanted to. And so that is how we can understand these points. And these points collectively create what is called a scatter plot. And let me just erase all of this stuff so you can see what exactly the scatter plot is. It's going to take me a little bit of time here. There we go. These points represent our scatter plot. Now, if you notice, we might see a relationship between these two numerical variables, as in we can see some sort of coordination between the two variables. As my hours of sleep get bigger and bigger, my GPA gets bigger. Let's use a different color maybe. Let's use blue over here. My GPA will get bigger and bigger. So that being said, the more sleep I get, the higher my GPA in general. And so that's what we're going to be talking about within this section of the course. We're going to be talking about coordinating two numerical variables using regression and regression tests. Anyways, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next lecture.